discovered Africa. I'll come back to that. I'll move on to the Dutch East Indian Company, the VOC in Dutch. I'll come back to that later too. I'll talk about the Dutch in Africa, more specifically South Africa. And I'm talking about the scramble for Africa, where the people try to, well, the European countries try to get a piece of Africa. And I'll look at three. The French, oh, I killed it. Let me just, sorry about that. I killed it. Okay, I'm back. I'll talk about the French, the Germans, the Portuguese, and let's start with the golden age of discovery. It started off with the scramble to find pieces of Africa. Now, if you talk, I was once in a conversation and I talked about discovery, and a person said to me, "You didn't discover us. We were there. You just didn't know that we were there. So you didn't really discover us. We were there." So, what was this golden age of discovery? The Europeans were looking for seaways to the east. And they did travel westwards, and that was Columbus, and he discovered the Americas. And the Portuguese tried to find a way round Africa to India. So I'm going to start with the first person that I want to talk to you is Bartholomew Diaz, and he traveled southwards along the coast of Africa. Now, if you look at this map, he stayed very close to the coast of Africa because he didn't know what was ahead of him. Today we can go onto Google and see what is ahead of us. But in those days, it was a leap of faith. You really didn't know where you're going, what lies ahead of you. So he started off in 1488 to find a route around Africa. And as I said, you can see he followed the coastline of Africa closely because it was uncertain territory that he was moving through. And all along, well, especially in Namibia, he left crosses, crosses made of stone that showed that he was there. And as he traveled southwards, when he reached more or less where Cape Town is today, a storm broke out, drove him into the ocean, and he didn't know where he was. So when the storm subsided, he turned initially eastwards, and he couldn't find land. And he then turned northwards and eventually reached what is today in a holiday town in South Africa called Mossel Bay. Now in 1988, they enacted this whole trip of Diaz, and they built a replica of Diaz's ship. They started off in Portugal and they traveled southwards. And today you can still see that replica in a museum in Mossel Bay. Now, he then continued onwards along the coast, and his his sailors force him to turn around because it was uncertain. The voyage already took so long, so it ended up almost with a mutiny, and he had to turn back. And on his way back, he then discovered Table Bay and Table Mountain, where you will be going on shore. So, so initially, the Portuguese called Table Mountain, Table Bay, the Cape of Storms, because he encountered a storm when he was rounding the southern point of Africa. But King John II of Portugal renamed it to the Cape of Good Hope. Good Hope, we went round the southern part of Africa, and maybe we will get to India, we will get to the east. So the second person that I want to talk to you was Vasco da Gama. Now, I'm going to leave this. It shows you the route, and I'm going to ask you if you can see something wrong in this map. There's something wrong in it. So already Cape of Good Hope, his trip started 9 years later, in July 1497. So as you can see, he followed quite a different route, because this part of the coast was already known to him. So a wider route, and they had navigation aids that they could do that. So he went round Africa, and by now you can see he started in July 1497. In December, that's 6 months later, he had rounded the Cape Point, and he was then next to a piece of land that they named Natal. Now, Natal is connected to, in Portuguese, with the birth of Christ, because it was December. And that name stuck in South Africa. It was first the province of Natal, but after 1994, the province was renamed to KwaZulu, the land of the Zulu, but they kept the Natal, and that is the name of the province. Now, from here onwards, Da Gama had trouble with the local populations. Why did he have trouble? The Arab traders was coming down the east coast of Africa, and they already turned the populations to Islam. So all the way northwards, there was problems for him. In March 1498, he reached Mozambique Island, and the Mozambique Island is to the north of Mozambique. In April 1498, what is today Mombasa, in Kenya, and with the help of a navigator, he managed to cross the ocean that we are going to sail through to India. And this help of this navigator was extremely important, because this person knew the waters that they were going through. And by May, you can see almost a year from when he started, he reached Kolkata, and he discovered a route to India. And on his way back, it was even more troublesome, because what was happening. The monsoon winds that bring the rain to India start in about June to September, and it's blowing directly against the route that they was traveling. So hardships, and they had to abandon some of their ships. They have to burn it before they left it behind. And they reached Lisbon in March 1499, and of the 170 plus people that departed from Lisbon with them to India, only 54 reached Portugal again. So less than a third of the population, or the men that traveled with him, died on this voyage. Mostly of things like scurvy. They didn't have fresh food to eat, and you need fresh food if you want to prevent scurvy. Now, the Dutch in South Africa. Now, this is a very interesting part for me. I want to start off with the Dutch East India Company. Now, in Dutch, you translate that to the Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie. I don't think my Dutch is very good, but more or less that. And translate VOC, and this company became a major player in what was happening in future in Southern Africa. This company was established in 20th March 1602, and it was cutting edge economy or capitalism at that stage. This was the first company that you can buy shares in. It was a stock holding company, and that was unheard of before at that time. So this VOC received a 21-year monopoly to trade with the East, with India, with China. And they could develop trading posts, because if you travel and want to buy goods in another country, you need a trading post from where you can do that. And they could even wage war on behalf of the Netherlands. So I don't think it was really waging war. It was more to protect your assets, to make sure that the local population don't destroy what you have there. So the VOC, the Dutch East India Company, decided that they need a refreshment. Remember, I told you it took a year, going one way, a year coming back. So you need to provide something to these sailors on their way to India and coming back. And they decided to start a refreshment station. Okay, let me just go back one step. Remember, the Portuguese was here first. They wasn't interested at all about the Cape. So they developed posts in what is today Angola and Mozambique. But the Dutch decided, we're going to start a refreshment station at the Cape. But it took 50 years after the VOC was founded, for this refreshment station to be initiated. So the first guy who arrived in the Cape was the guy with the name of Jan van der Riebeeck. He arrived in the Cape on the 6th of April 1652, and with a job to start this refreshment station. Some of his men on the ships died on his way to Cape Town, but 82 men and 8 women arrived in the Cape. So one was his wife, Maria. So for every 10 men, 1 woman. So I'll come back to this a little bit later on. So the first people that he met in the Cape was not the black population. It was another group of people, 2 groups actually, the Khoi and the San. They were the original inhabitants of what is now the Western Cape. The Khoi you could divide into 2 groups. The one group were herdsmen. They kept cattle to the advantage of the Dutch. They could trade to get fresh meat from them. And then the other group of the Khoi was this, what they called, beach combers, strandlopers, people who were living next to the ocean and was scavengers, was collecting food from the ocean. The second group there, the San, was more a gathering, hunting group, and they used to live in the more remote areas of Southern Africa. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what did the Europeans bring to Africa? They brought their diseases that had the Khoi wasn't resistant to these diseases, smallpox, you name it. They wasn't used to it. So large numbers of this Khoi died out. But a lot of these 82 men that I told you earlier married some of these ladies. So if you are South African, if you have roots that go back to that time, there is some African blood in you. No ways about it. So the first winter in Cape Town was very bad. Lots of rain, destruction, and it can get very bad in Cape Town. So I hope, for your sake, when you reach Cape Town, the weather will be fine. When you're in Cape Town, I don't know what trips you have checked or booked, but if you can go into Cape Town, the original garden that they developed for growing vegetable and fruit is still available, although slightly in a different format, but that is still available. And because of the bad conditions in the area of Cape Town at that stage, this poor Jan van Riebeeck couldn't provide food for the passing ships and also not for themselves. It was